Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaritamasthu Mavidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are reading from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, also known as the Apostle to the South, one of Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples, who opened the centers in the southern part of India. And we're reading in his talk called Science, Modern and Ancient. And we were beginning to talk a little bit about reincarnation and wondering why one person was born in one condition and another born in another. And so continuing on that vein, he says, our future condition of existence, too, must be an embodied condition like the present, as when we leave this body, we carry along with us innumerable unfulfilled desires, which we try our best to satisfy in the present life, but never succeeded in doing so. These unfulfilled desires must therefore make us search for another living organism with which it may satisfy them, and we must have to take up bodies after bodies until we shall be able to realize our all-perfect nature, free from all wants, all desires. Hence, reincarnation is an established fact. That is the discovery of the ancient science. Upon this fact, the whole of the Veda is based. This is the one distinguishing feature of the Vedic religion from all the other religions of the world, except Buddhism and religions analogous to it. And of course, we're quite familiar with the idea that people that remember their past lives have reported them when they're a very young child. There are a few rare cases where people remember something about their past life and report them, and in many cases these things can be verified. They can tell you where they lived and who their mother and father and sisters and brothers and uncles and aunts, so forth, were. And there's all sorts of YouTube videos online that you can watch documenting these things. Many times it's someone who had an early tragic death, and the parents started to investigate because the child had so many nightmares and or some sort of weird phobia or some sort of weird set of desires that they couldn't explain. Since we're in Hollywood, I'll tell you a Hollywood story. There are a couple of Hollywood stories, actually. This young girl started, first of all, she rarely talked until she was probably much older than most kids start talking, and still didn't say a whole lot even after that. And she seemed to be obsessed with old movies. Her mother said that she would sit and make herself up with makeup, and nobody told her how to do it. She just seemed to know how to do it. Then one day, I think she was already in her teens by then, or close to it, she comes to her mother with a picture that she'd been looking at of old movie stars, and she says, "Mother, I think I was this person." And she started telling her all sorts of things about her, and there was actually somebody doing a biography on her out here in Hollywood, and they came out to meet him, and he was quite fascinated with it. And it turned out that she had been a child star, one of these in silent pictures. So that's why she didn't talk much, and that's why she knew how to do her makeup. And she'd basically been worked to death. So that was her story, and that's why she seem to have these peculiar desires. All right. We are now in a position to understand the ancient science, or the Veda. Both science and Veda have come from roots meaning the same thing. The Veda, or ancient science, differs from modern science in regarding the external and internal universe to be pervaded by God. The ever-helpful Veda, knowing the limited capacity of an ordinary human mind, has not brought forth for it a limitless God, but has given to it only that much of him in his various manifestations which it can perfectly grasp, love, and then realize. Man has got innumerable wants and love, and infinitely loving God also has innumerable powers to satisfy all those wants and even more. Behind each of his innumerable powers he exists, and so each such power may be regarded as a separate God united in one supreme Lord of the whole universe. Yes, this is by far the best way of understanding all the different aspects of God, all the different gods and goddesses, the Indras and the Vayus and the Agnis and so forth, is that they are manifestations of powers of the infinite God, and we just tend to personify them and sort of give them names. This does not mean polytheism. Thus, for the benefit of all people, the Vedas has brought God nearer home to them than any other scripture of the world. Modern science has localized consciousness, intelligence, and many noble and ignoble qualities in people, and people alone, depriving the whole universe of them. The ancient science, on the other hand, has seen the one, all-perfect, all-powerful being pervaded and enlivening the entire cosmos as well as all the living beings that dwell in it. Yes, indeed, this is a wonderful lecture. I often wish that my old friend John Dobson had read this. I doubt if he had, because I think he would have enjoyed this, because he had this idea of this sentiency pervading all matter, and we often speak of a differentiation between living and non-living, which is natural, and in fact Ramakrishna will do that as well, even though he's now at this point saying that that there's all-pervading being is enlivening the entire cosmos, both the living and the non-living. So, but that's the clumsiness of our language sometimes, is that we use the same terms and things for different situations. Consciousness is one of those terms where it's used in so many ways it gets confusing. And so we don't think of this table being conscious like we're conscious, and we don't think of plants being conscious as we're conscious, and yet they seem to have some sort of sense of being. Plants seem to have an intelligence of some sort that we can actually record with polygraphs. And of course, plant scientists like Luther Burbank and George Washington Carver would say that they would commune with the plants in ways that would help them understand how to breed them and grow them. So there's definitely seems to be an intelligence, and we've often heard about people who are better with plants than others and how they'll talk to their plants, and how the plants seem to respond to them, even though they haven't studied English or some other language. We have no idea what language. But when we talk, we're delivering a feeling as well. And the feeling seems to get across to the plants. So this is an important concept, and he's just put it right in a nutshell here, that there's this one all-pervading Lord of the universe, which we then sort of personify as various energies, and this universal power permeates all things. All right. The ancient science, on the other hand, has seen the one, all-perfect, all-powerful being pervading and enlivening the entire cosmos, as well as all the living beings that dwell in it. The votary of the modern science has to bring forth all his conscious energies out of his little limited self to subdue and bring the world under his control. The votary of the ancient science not only helps himself, but gets more help from the living God manifesting himself through his creation in various forms by subduing his egotism in order to acquire true knowledge and consequent blissfulness springing therefrom. Modern science has given only a limited life to man, bounded on both sides by birth and death, while the ancient science, on the other hand, has given eternal life to him who shows death to be merely a gateway to another life, and affirming that he existed and has had several births before this birth, and is going to have many more births hereafter until he realizes his infinite nature. For people of higher capacities, too, the ancient science has reserved the worship of the eternal and infinite being, while for some others it has reserved the highest wisdom, which it enables them to realize their oneness with the infinite being, taking them beyond the limitations of space, time, and causation. Yes, space, time, and causation are the ingredients of Maya, you could say. They're the framework of Maya. As soon as you go beyond space, time, and causation, you're not in Maya. And so this is why people in deep meditation experience a feeling of timelessness. And in brain studies, they find that the area of the brain that distinguishes you from your environment tends to quiet down, and so the idea of being limited in space quiets down. So these are natural consequences of this nature of Maya to be in time and space. And of course, causation is an infinite oneness. Everything is interconnected. And so with everything interconnected, all causation is seen to be caused by all of these mysterious interconnections. Thus we have been taught, it goes on, in the Ishopanishad, to see everything changeful in the universe pervaded by one supreme soul. And the opening verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us that although the threefold manifestations of matter are in themselves changeful and fleeting, yet they appear to be real, as the one reality is behind them. From time immemorial, the phenomenal nature of the universe was known to our ancient seers. By studying and analyzing some of these phenomena, they arrived at the knowledge of one supreme being pervading the whole universe. Let us see how it was possible for them to do so. What is a phenomenon? It is simple or elementary in its nature. Is it simple or elementary in its nature, or a compound? Because it is a mere appearance, it cannot exist independently of a knower to whom it must appear, and besides, there must be something to appear. So again, this harks to that original duality. From the oneness has to spring both the knower and the known, the subject and the object. There must be something to appear. Then, out of their union, an appearance or a phenomenon becomes possible. There has to be a process of knowing. Hence, it is a compound and is made up of three factors: the seer, the object, and that which brings about their union. We now see that no phenomenon can exist without a seer or a soul. Hence, no phenomenon is soulless, or in other words, every phenomenon is infilled with a soul and hence is alive. The universe is made up of innumerable forms, touches, tastes, smells, and sounds, which go by the name of phenomena. And you are the one soul of all of these which began to exist with your birth and which will cease to exist with your death. So along with you, your world arose, and along with you it will set. But you know that the world existed before your birth, and it will exist even after your death. Indeed, you know it to be beginningless and endless, sometimes manifesting and sometimes dissolving itself, since one of its factors is its indestructible matter, which in Sanskrit is called adhibhuta, as we have just now learnt. If this beginningless and endless creation is also an aggregate of innumerable phenomenon, it cannot be soulless. It must have a soul of its own, which must be beginningless and deathless, that is, eternal. And as it must pervade the entire creation, it must be all-pervasive or infinite. This eternal and infinite soul goes by the name of God, the eternal creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe. Hence, the universe is never godless or soulless. It is the manifested and living form of the deity, much more living and infinitely more powerful than the living body, either belonging to it or to you or to me or anyone else. Because, of course, all of us individuals, that's our little self that's not eternal. The eternal part is the part that's connected to this universal part. We cannot dissociate him from the universe, just as we cannot dissociate ourselves from our body, as long as we deem ourselves to be people. Bhagavan Vyasa, after describing God as having the whole universe for his body, the highermost heaven forming the crown of his head, and the lower sphere, Patala, forming the sole of his feet, and the intermediate spheres forming the different parts of his body, says in the course of his description that such a vast God lives inside man. So this is the idea of the cosmic being, and in order to get an idea of what this is, it's given various body parts. So we think of we know what we're like. We have this body, we have a head and arms and feet and legs and so forth. And so they use an analogy with this physical body of ours and say that this universe is the cosmic body of that eternal God. And then he says it lives inside of us. This is, of course, the idea of Atman is Brahman, that there isn't really any difference, that we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, and we reflect the wholeness within ourselves. You are not to look far for him, and he alone can remove all your wants, clear all your doubts, give you eternal bliss and peace, save you once for all from the darkness of ignorance by lighting in the chamber of your heart the eternal lamp of wisdom. This is what the ancient science teaches us. Can we call it old and barbarous as modern science would have it called? We have been taught by modern biology that many thousands of years before, there was no man in this planet of ours. The blind soul was then encased in the protoplasmic body of amoeba, which in course of time, through a process of almost innumerable evolutions and surviving various struggles, has now evolved as man. Thus, according to it, the soul is emerging from utter darkness to more and more light, and it will have to remain always limited, being the gradual development of something perfectly limited. This conclusion is neither very rational, as we have seen, nor at all desirable. And of course, the idea would be that that infinite spirit is evolving and becoming more and more aware of its true nature. And so this march up the evolutionary ladder, you could say, of conscious beings, the things are becoming more and more conscious of their true nature. It's not that the true nature wasn't in there. It just was. I mean, you can kind of reinterpret these words and say that it's the amoeba is in a process of evolutions and surviving struggles, evolving into man, and it's emerging from the utter darkness to more light. Well, if you think of this as the infinite being shrouded in ignorance as these lower beings, then it makes perfect sense. It's going to want to evolve into it being something closer and closer to its true nature, into a form that's able to realize its true nature. So we should not look down upon the conclusions of the ancient science, which teaches that the entire universe with all its living beings has come out of the infinite wisdom of God, the source of all life, light, peace, and blissfulness. He, the soul of our souls, is inside ourselves. From him alone we can get whatever we want. Hence we have to make friends with him by loving him more than we love this world, with all its charms, that is, more than we love our earthly friends and relatives, more than we love all enjoyments of the senses, nay, more than we love ourselves. And of course, you could substitute him, the all-pervading God, with the all-pervading goddess, and it works just as well. The all-supreme being is really genderless, and we just tend to think of it in terms of one gender or another. Or if you're quite sophisticated, you can try to think of it as a blending of the two genders, and think of some of the Hindu images where you have a blending of the two halves manifesting as one being, like an image of Radha and Krishna, or Shiva and Shakti. And it's really one thing, it's not really two. It's just that our minds tend to want to think of things in terms of either one or the other. Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna once gave us a fine parable, and that is this. One morning, two friends went out for a walk. When they had gone a certain distance, they came by a very beautiful garden. And as the gate was open and there was none to prevent their going in, they were tempted to enter it. Everything was so very beautiful all round, and everything appeared to be so very friendly. And they walked a considerable distance inside it, till one of them, who was of the calculating nature, told his friend, "I want to estimate the value of all this beautiful garden. I want to know the number of mango trees, coconut trees, etc., that it contains. So, dear friend, you please walk along hither and thither for some time, till I come back." So saying, he left his side, and when the latter found himself alone, he wanted to go more inside. He saw a gardener working at a distance, and went up to him and began to make inquiries about the proprietor of the garden. The kind gardener told him about the infinite goodness of his master, and said, "My master is always kind towards everyone who goes to him. He never leaves this garden. You can go and see him if you like. Please proceed a few steps forward, and you will be able to see the nice little mansion where he has always stayed." Thus informed, the man thanked the gardener and hastened to the mansion, and reached it in a few minutes. Entering it, he found the master, a beautiful-looking, simple and sweet gentleman, sitting in the front room, as if he was waiting for him. As soon as he entered, the proprietor got up and received him very kindly, and asked him to sit down near him, and he talked so kindly to him that they became friends in no time. The master took his new friend by the hand, showed him the many beautiful shrubs, plants, rare flowers, and fruits, made him taste some of the very fine fruits, gave him a few fine and rare flowers to take home, and asked him to come there very often. After enjoying his company for some time, the young man took leave of him, expressing his gratefulness for the kind treatment which he had received from the good man's hand. On the way back, he saw his friend returning after a fruitless attempt to calculate the number of trees, for the garden was a very large one. When the latter saw his friend, well refreshed and having some fine flowers with him, and he came to know about his new friendship with the proprietor of the garden, he could not help crying out, "Oh, what a fool I have been to have wasted my time in this way. You are really wise, my friend. Yours is the enjoyment, mine is mere trouble." And so that kind of a good analogy for what we do in our scientific minds. We tend to pick everything apart into little pieces, and we start looking at all the little pieces, try to see what each piece is doing, and then we find that we can't really understand all the little pieces until we understand the relationship of the pieces. And then we find that we have to figure out the context that all these pieces exist in, and we get to looking at larger and larger pictures. And so it's interesting, and I'm going to talk about this Sunday, that we end up looking at bigger and bigger pictures and seeing how everything is interrelated, which leads you right back to the fact that everything springs from one source, and that's why they're all interrelated. This is quite an elaborated version of the parable that you find, say, in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Ramakrishnananda seems to have a knack for storytelling. From this parable, we learn that the calculating spirit of modern science will never bring any definite knowledge to it, and it will always have to remain in some darkness, in the same darkness, in spite of the very partial victories over some of nature's forces, which it has won. So, if we want to be really happy and really wise, if we want to escape repeated births and deaths, we should follow the path shown to us by the ancient science or the Vedas. Blessed are they who obey the Vedic injunctions, for it is they who will ultimately be illumined and saved after clearly understanding the holiness of earthly as well as heavenly enjoyments. The utter hollowness of earthly and heavenly enjoyments. For a person who wants to be eternally happy through the guidance of the Vedas finds, after enjoying heavenly life for several times, that even heaven cannot be the permanent abode which he so much longs for, so in time goes to the higher teachings to be found in the latter portions of it. After following those teachings, he ultimately realizes everything in himself and becomes perfect. And of course, you're probably familiar with the idea that the Vedas have several portions, and many of the first portions deal with rites and sacrifices and various means of attaining various things in this world. If you want a good spouse, if you want to have good progeny, if you want to have a good job, if you want to do this, do that, something else, good health, there are all sorts of rites and rituals that you can pay a priest for to accomplish for you. There are many prayers and incantations, hymns of praise for the various deities that you might want to appease in order to have a more blissful life in the world. Prayers to the ancestors and so forth. And then ultimately you get to the Upanishads, which talk about the identity of the Atman with Brahman, and how one should go beyond all of these other things to that ultimate truth. So this is really quite a remarkable lecture that he's put together here, showing this, how all of this works together and how everything is really united in one. All right, so we'll go on to the next section in this subsection of Volume 1, and this is called Determination of Conscious Tendencies, which of course is another big topic in science these days, where the idea of, again, consciousness gets very muddied and complicated. And if you look at the writings of various philosophers and scientists, they tend to define consciousness in a way that will show that their theory of consciousness is correct rather than somebody else's theory of consciousness. And so we tend to define things in the way that suits our purposes. And consciousness is used in way too many different ways, and so it becomes very complicated. So one way to get around that is to use slightly different terms. All-pervading consciousness, sentiency would be another word that one could use, indicating a more rudimentary form of consciousness, as opposed to what we think of as ourselves being conscious when we're awake and unconscious when we're asleep. So in some sense, you're still conscious when you're asleep. You're just conscious of your dream state. So let's see how Ramakrishnananda is going to tackle this rather gnarly subject. Everything in this world has got its own peculiarity which distinguishes it from every other thing. This peculiarity determines its tendency. The mango on the branch has a tendency to go down, and the smoke, which is hotter than the surrounding atmosphere, has a tendency to go up as long as it is hot. This is the way the early Greek philosophers analyzed the world. I think it was Aristotle that said that everything had its natural place. Earth always falls down. And so if you take a clump of earth, it falls down. And so the natural place of solids was down at the center. And then around that flows the water. It also goes down, but it sits on top of the earthly element. So the water element is the next element which sits on top of the earth element. And then you have the air element, which floats on top of the water. And then you have the fire element, which always goes up. And so that was his idea of these elements, is that they had their natural place in what he could get from his casual observations. All right, so this is kind of the same idea here. But in such cases, neither the mango nor the smoke knows its own tendencies, as both are unconscious. But you can see, again, we could say that they don't have the kind of consciousness we're used to, but they have some sort of sentiency because they seem to know where their place is. And so you could call that a kind of knowingness. This unconscious tendency, virtue or quality inherent in things, is properly the subject of modern science. But this morning we are able to deal with conscious beings' tendencies which are inherent in conscious beings, tendencies which are cognized by the individual that possesses them. There are many people in the world who arrogate consciousness only to themselves and deny it to lower animals. Yes, I heard a lecture by a professor who talked about how Descartes thought that animals were simply automatons. He lived at the time when they were making mechanical dolls and things that could, you wind them up or run them on steam engines and they could move around. And so he thought animals were like that. And the professor added, Descartes must not have had any pets. Anybody that's had pets knows that they're not just automatons, that they have personalities just like people do. You get some cats that are more ornery than other cats, some that are more caring and loving than others, and same thing with dogs and so forth. Some that are much more trainable and others that are less trainable. Some that want to be the king of the pack and some that seem to always take a back seat. So we will not be like Descartes and say that animals are not conscious here. How can such people ever imagine trees and plants to have souls? But we have been taught by our forefathers that not only human beings, not only the lower animals, even trees and plants have souls. They are conscious. We can determine the tendencies of lower animals as well as trees and plants by studying them, for their tendencies are not very many, but when we come to determine the tendencies of man, we find a real difficulty. So in other words, compared to us, they're relatively simple. I mean, scientists can look at plants and the roots know where the water is and they can go towards the water, and the leaves know where the sun is and they point themselves towards the sun. And so all of these tendencies are quite obvious in plants and so forth. And as we mentioned, animals seem to also have various tendencies. But when we come to determine the tendencies of people, we find a real difficulty. For the tendency of every person is different from that of every other person. The tendencies of those who are moral are diametrically opposed to those of men who are immoral, and so on. And thus, we want to determine the tendencies of all humanity. It appears to be an impossible task. And of course, again, this is a debate among philosophers. There have been philosophers that have proposed the idea that human nature is inherently selfish. And then there are counter-philosophers who will say that humans are innately caring. And so you get both viewpoints, which probably leads us to the conclusion that we have both tendencies, and some of us manifest more of one tendency than the other. And all you have to do is observe even animals caring for their young and how they'll protect their young. They have to have a feeling of caringness, and yet they also have a feeling of trying to survive, and so they have to be selfish enough in order to feed themselves in order to survive. So both of these tendencies can even be observed in animals. Looking at our religious faiths, we find out that some people belonging to a certain religion hold views exactly opposite to those of others believing in another religion. While some hold that God has forms, some others hold that it is a sin to invest him with a form, and all act according to their own convictions. But although when we try to study the various tendencies of human beings, we find it impossible to determine them, we arrive at such conclusions only because we have not gone very near to the question. A village market appears from a distance as nothing but chaos, but when we come nearer it, it does not appear to be so. The dealers are selling their articles systematically, and everything there seems to be in perfect order. A thing from a distance always creates some confused idea in it, but when we approach it and examine properly, we find that everything is systematic and well regulated. And of course, I like to think of religions as ways of going up different paths. And so you don't expect the way of going up one path. If there's this big mountain peak and there are all sorts of trails and places where you could do rock climbing and roads that go up there as well, you might choose to take the road if you've got a motorbike. You might choose to take the hiking trail. You might choose to climb the rocks. So if someone says, well, how do you get to the top of the mountain? And they tell you, well, you move your feet like this, and then you ride up on these wheels, and the person that's going to hike or rock climb is going to think you're crazy. So the different ways we can get up a mountain are similar to different religions that have different paths. It just depends on which path you're going to choose will determine how you go up that path. All right, so our great master Sri Ramakrishna tells us, if you look at the sea from a distance, you will not be able to understand that the whole sea is full of salt. Because you cannot see the stars in the daytime, you cannot come to the conclusion that the sky is without them. So if you try to study anything from a distance, we are apt to misunderstand it, and hence such a study always proves to be almost fruitless. But when we come very near the object, then we find that there is a law and system behind it. We used to take our telescopes out for people to look at them, and if you get up early in the morning and perhaps, say, Jupiter or Venus or one of the really bright planets, those are the two brightest, if they happen to be up in the morning sky, you can train your telescope on it. And then if you keep your telescope aligned with that, you can even track it during the daytime, even though you look up in the sky and you don't see anything. With your telescope, you can actually still make out Jupiter or Venus because the telescope obviously makes it more visible. And of course, you have to make sure you keep your telescope aligned to it. Once you've lost it, it'd be very difficult to find it by chance again, unless you have some sort of finder mechanical mechanism that finds things automatically for you. But it was very interesting to see that those objects are bright enough to see in the daytime with a telescope. Man is active by his very nature, and what is the meaning of all his activity? Why is he active at all? Activity presupposes want. Whenever we work for something. And what is that thing which we want? This is not a difficult question to answer, for everyone knows what he wants. People want to be happy, and therefore, everywhere, people want happiness. People must exert themselves in order to get it. So behind every activity, we find that there is a want. And when we try to find out what it is, we find that a person wants only three things. Firstly, a person wants to be happy. Secondly, he wants to know all. And thirdly, he wants to live forever. Now, you see, being an embodied being with a birth date and an expiration date, you're not going to get those things if you think of yourself as a body and a mind. But if you identify yourself with your true self, then you'll get all three. These are the three wants, and they bring out or call forth all our activities and latent energies. A person wants to be happy and finds out that it is surrounded on all sides, mostly by circumstances that do not make us happy. So we find out that we must struggle against all environments to get the happiness that is lurking behind it. So this is pretty good description. We're constantly trying to find that happiness, and some people think it's going to be by being famous, and so they want to be famous for something. Some people will even do outlandishly evil things just to be well known. It's crazy. Rather than doing something of great accomplishment, they find it easier to do something heinous in order to be known. When you ask some criminal like that why they did it, I wanted to be remembered. And of course, the other desire might be to be wealthy, and so some people form some sort of business and determine what other people want and try to make a business out of it by supplying those wants. And other people just decide they're going to steal from other people. And so people are trying to get this happiness in various and ornery ways sometimes. So he finds out that he must struggle against such environments to get the happiness that is lurking behind. In the same manner, his love for life makes him struggle for it. He wishes to live the longest term of life and therefore struggles to find out all those means that will enable him to live healthily for the longest period of time. Health brings happiness, and ill health makes him miserable. So he wants to be healthy. He does not want to go away from the world which he feels to be the real home. Of course, when you're used to a place, you feel that's your real home. But when you think about it, think of various instances where someone has been forced to change their home for some reason, and then they find that they're actually happier in their new situation. A lot of times someone might get fired from a job, and they're forced to get a different job. And all of a sudden they realize, I actually like this job better. So sometimes circumstances force us into another situation. But normally, people get very cozy and satisfied with the world they're in, and they don't want it to change. Of course, some people always think it's greener on the other side of the hill too. So you get both. You get both tendencies. You either don't want to change or you do want to change. Anyway, he comes. He does not want to go away from this world, which he feels to be the real home. He again comes to know that knowledge is power, and power will bring him happiness. Power will make him lord over and independent of all untoward circumstances, and so he wants to attain power through knowledge. Of course, Mother Nature usually has the last word. People think they're going to be all powerful, and then there's an earthquake or a tsunami or a flood or a hurricane or something, and things are wiped away in an instant. All these wants make him constantly restless. He calls forth all his energies, and with their help struggles to remove these wants. The struggle is what we call life. It is going on not only amongst human beings, but also among the lower animals, and I would say even among the plants. The plants compete with each other for sunlight and nutrients and water and so forth. So that's about the end of our time. So we will continue this lecture next time, and he will be going into analyzing how this consciousness that is driving us towards all these things eventually drives us towards realizing our own true nature. For members, remember that we have our annual members meeting tomorrow at 10, and you can join online, or if you're close by or prefer in person, you can come to the greenhouse living room and we'll have it on the big screen TV. But all the presenters will be presenting by Zoom, and so you can enjoy it at home as well. All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om peace, peace, peace. And that chant summarizes his thoughts here, doesn't it? All right. See you next week.
Swami, I think it's interesting when you